Serious, Redditors who are citizens of extremely small countries, for example Andorra, Monaco, Nauru, Liechtenstein, etc. What are the advantages and disadvantages? Has anyone ever heard of Bhutan? Pros: the environment. For sure, we are known for our environment. Clean and crisp air. It feels good to live here, and I don't think half the people here realize how good we have it. And I guess free education and healthcare are there too. Free education till high school. And even after that, lots of scholarships are given out. And the population is, guess we don't even make up to 1 million people. So it's not crowded. Cons: it's still an underdeveloped country and we have a long way to go. We basically survive off funds. And I guess this will be a con for some people. There was a proposal to open fast food chains here like McDonald's and all. The government denied it. Oh, and for tourists, it's insanely difficult to get into the country. Malta: basically everyone here is bilingual, if not multilingual. English and Maltese, yes, we have our own language. It's basically just a frickload of plagiarized languages with a few unique words. So if you wanna move here, don't worry, you don't have to put any effort in to learn a language. Our buses are cheap, but don't sit in the wrong place or a granny will stare you down. If you wanna move here, you need a small loan of $1 million. Don't ask what our strange H is, we don't even freaking know. Geckos everywhere. Please don't pick them up or hurt them. Chameleons. Don't freaking hurt them. They are rare and they are shy as it is. Our language is a mix of Arabic, Italian and a tiny bit of Latin thrown in, cause why not? Our climate is Mediterranean until about November. Then frick you. Thunderstorms and hail included. All in all, it's pretty great. Just expensive to move here : I live in Moldova. The cons definitely outweigh the pros, some of them being: first and foremost, the absolute worst thing is that many top sellers from sites like Amazon and eBay don't ship to your country. This leads to the next point. Due to the limited population and geographical resources, most manufacturers do not open in Moldova, thus you have to pay around 40% more to buy foreign stuff. Increased level of corruption due to lack of interest from other countries. Due to the small size of the country, Moldova is only bordered by 2 countries and doesn't have access to a sea or any mountains. Pros: can't really think any, but if I have to say it, maybe that there are no terrorist attacks. Bermuda. Population 65k. Obvious advantages of sun, pink beaches and spectacular scenery, as well as expats from all over the world. Disadvantages are cost of living, hurricanes, difficulty getting off the rock, and the tininess of the island. Coming from a similar sized island with 1/6 of the population off the west coast of Canada helped a lot with the adjustment. Loving the milder winter temperatures. You must really like islands. Coming from Luxembourg, public transportation inside the whole country is extremely cheap. Also, it's really easy to meet up with people. The travel times are short, and in the central capital you can find anything. Antigua and Barbuda. Population 100,000. Cons: there isn't much to do besides drink and go to the beach. You can't buy things online and have them shipped here because no online stores ship here. You have to go through a US mail forwarder, which is costly. Shopping locally is even more costly and the selection sucks. High cost of living. Island time is a real thing. People will always arrive to events gatherings late and events never start on time. Pros: island time is also a pro. Everyone moves at their own pace and you can too. It's a small island. We're not in a rush to go anywhere. It might just be the people I hang out with, but few have regular 9-5 jobs, so it's not unusual to find yourself having a beer on the beach with friends on some random Wednesday afternoon. Low crime rate. Low population means everyone knows everyone. Like a small town. Might be a con for some, but I like it. Iceland. Population 330,000. Pros are everyone knows everyone else. Cons: exact same thing. Pros: you have a better football team than England. Cons: sometimes your barber is out of the country for large swaths of time, beating England. I hail from Guernsey, Channel Islands. Population 60,000. About the same as Greenland or Stourbridge in Worcestershire. It's a British Crown dependency. It is, of course, pretty small. You can drive from one side of the island to the other in about 25 minutes at our national speed limit of 35 miles per hour. You can walk it in about 4 hours. I still haven't learned to drive yet, even though I could have done 5 years ago. We have one town, which we know as town. It's still a bustling metropolis if you come from one of our dependencies. Alderney, Pop, 2000, or Sark, Pop, 500. Given what's been going on in the world, I'm grateful for our politics being pretty boring. We don't have any political parties, and our issues aren't stuff like starting a trade war. It's how to fund a new high school and bitching about the ferry operator. I've been living in Singapore, a big country, for the last few months, and nobody here has heard of it. I have to show it to them on the map, or lie and say I'm from the UK, and inevitably when I do show it to them I have to explain that no, we're not part of the UK. Yes, I'm a British citizen. It says European Union on my passport, but we're not part of the EU. But I stand to lose my rights to live in it. Thanks Britain. And we don't have an army, but the British are supposed to defend us, and we've only been invaded once in 1940, but they didn't then blah blah blah. Naturally it's a very close-knit community, and if you know a goon seaman in Singapore it's probably me. Hi. Also, tax haven. Northern Ireland. We get dual Irish and British citizenship. Con. Legitimate terrorist organization member politicians calling other terrorist member politicians members of terrorist organizations. That, and the occasional bomb causing traffic in Belfast. Beulah. I live in Fiji, and like many Pacific Island countries, the major con is the isolation. We are a great distance from all of our neighbors, and certain food items are straight up impossible to get, or are very expensive. You won't believe what we are willing to pay for some blueberries. But that aside, I've never found the small size to be a huge problem. I grew up in the United States, and at the end of the day people can only manage social circles of a certain size. Being in a small island community hasn't made my social circle any larger or smaller. You do end up knowing a lot of people nearly everywhere you go, but that same phenomena occurs in small city in the United States all the time. In general, the culture and interests we share as a people makes everywhere you go feel very welcoming. And most people don't know this, but Fiji is made up of over 300 islands, so the amount of exploring in completely empty, near perfect islands you can do is endless. I'm from Estonia, though currently living in London, which isn't as tiny as Andorra or Liechtenstein but still relatively small, although there are other factors as well. One thing I've noticed is the effect of everyone knowing everyone, as is the case in a small country versus the anonymity of a big city like London. This manifests itself in a weird way. I'm a big gym goer, and in London I see it all the time that people just walk off leaving weights lying around and not cleaning up after themselves. Maybe partially because here they're one in a very big crowd. Nobody will know who didn't unload that barbell. In Estonia, however, the gyms are much more orderly. People always take their weights off and put things back, and I think it's to do with it being more easily visible if you're acting like a douche. Anonymity breeds douchebaggery. Familiarity counteracts it. Estonia has a great flag. I did some work in a tiny country called Niue. Population of about 1,600. Takes about an hour and a half to drive around the perimeter of the island. Everyone knows each other and it's just a completely relaxed place. I don't mean island resort style relaxing. It's just a place where every person is chill. The internet was so dang slow though. I've lived in two different small countries for years, Singapore and Brunei. Brunei is about the size of Delaware. Singapore is half of Los Angeles. Singapore is 10 times as densely populated as Brunei. Pros: and if you stick to the roads it's difficult to get lost, even without satnav, and quick to get around, to as far as anything over 30 minutes drive, and mobile reception virtually everywhere, and possibly cheap imports. There's little reason to set high tariffs for stuff that'll be imported anyway. Yes, big exceptions such as Singapore cars, etc. And geography and history is easier since there isn't dozens of states or counties to learn about. Cons: and you will have to vacation out of the country. Could be a pro, I guess, if you have a passport as good as Singapore's, but other smaller countries might not have such luck. And limited life choices domestically. It's not feasible to be a rancher in Singapore. Neither is it to be a rocket scientist in Brunei. If your aspirations aren't found locally, you'll have to move. Depends. And you'll see familiar faces very frequently. Some people like it, some don't. And healthcare. Singapore has really good access to healthcare. Costs aside, bit for less dense Brunei, people do get airlifted overseas for critically urgent procedures, and public transport. In Brunei due to low density it hardly exists, while Singapore has one of the better ones in the world. Lived in Andorra for a while. Nice place, not much to do and really expensive. I also destroyed a hotel room. From Guam, tiny island in the middle of the Pacific, though we are a territory of the US. Pop, 160,212 square miles. Pros, super multicultural due to proximity to Asia and a bustling and diverse tourism industry. Japan, Korea, China, Russia. Beautiful scenery, beaches, hikes, weather. It's usually in the 80s and the ocean is warm. We're pretty American and our standard of living is pretty good. Cons, shipping takes ages but at least we have it. If you don't like the outdoors, kind of boring, crappy internet, traffic and non-existent public transportation, nothing to do, limited career opportunities. Costa Rica, 5 million people. Good, public transport is cheap and ubiquitous. Medicines are largely OTC and pharmacists can recommend medications for typical problems. Socialized medicine with a single payer model not unlike Medicare. No military and no military culture, and even war toys are prohibited. No heating nor cooling costs. BC weather is mild year around. Civil disobedience is a tradition, and protests are taught in the schools. Protesting is practiced regularly. The whole country has a very high walkability scale. You can easily use public transport for longer distances, and easily walk to your basic needs from almost any home, market, bank, bakery, post office, bus stops. But most things are imported and are expensive due to taxes. Corruption is rampant. Petty theft and property theft, like through title theft, is rampant. I used to live in Nepal until I was 8. The country was super small and when I lived there, everybody hated the king and wanted a democracy so there were a ton of crowds protesting and etc. It was pretty crazy. Pros are that food in comparison to the US was super duper cheap I guess. $1 is like 100 rupees. I had family in India and we went there once a year I suppose. Everybody just knew each other and would randomly drop by at houses and talk and stuff. I am probably wrong but it felt safer there too. Since we knew everybody people would just keep an eye on each other's kids. I do live in Switzerland, which is bigger than Liechtenstein, but still small compared to its neighbors countries. I don't really see any advantage in living in a small country. The biggest disadvantage IMHO is having a dead downtown with shops that close at 6 p.m. I'm from Uruguay, a really small country in South America. Advantages: we can drive from south to north of the country in only 7:30 hours. We have a really nice weather and beautiful beaches. Disadvantages: sometimes it's really freaking boring to live here. I live in Togo right now, which is smaller than Switzerland but slightly larger than the Netherlands. If the roads allowed travel above an average speed of 30 km/h, one would be able to drive from the border of Benin to Ghana in less than an hour. If the roads were modern, one would be able to drive from the northernmost point to the southernmost point in 7 hours. The reality is, however, that traveling here sucks. It is dangerous and expensive to the average Togolese citizen. Therefore, many people only rarely visit outside their cultural region. Because of this, Togo feels like a much larger country culturally. I'm coming from the Midwest US. There are 4 or 5 major cultures, languages that each have their own customs and distinct personalities. Also, because Togo is long and skinny, it has a few different climate zones, with the south being hot and humid but not rainy, the central part being more rainy and frosty, and the northernmost part being dry savanna. People here understand Togo is small because they have been told so, and they've seen maps, but the majority of people will never fully grasp the vastness of the US or the world. It's hard to state the advantages or disadvantages of it being small because it's an underdeveloped West African nation, so there are mostly just disadvantages. I will say that it's really neat to be able to drive for 3 hours and arrive in a place that has a different climate, culture, language, food, and resources than the place you left. Almost everything else I can think of is a challenge or a disadvantage. Side note, among the foreign worker crowd, We share info on all the places to eat, of which there are few, so I'm vaguely aware of the majority of passable restaurants in the entire country. Also, there are only 2 public swimming pools in the country outside of the capital, so once when going on a first date at a swimming pool I randomly ran into other Europeans I knew. It turned out alright because the date turned into a public relationship, but there was a moment where I was worried about fielding questions about my love life from half the foreign workers in the country. The gossip source is strong. Singapore. Kick-ass public transport system, but absolutely disgusting car prices. No matter how great the subway is, a car is better and I'd rather be able to buy a car. Why can't I buy a car? Because I've only got 2 kidneys, and even if I sold them both, I won't be able to spend my last day or so driving around. If most middle classes and buy a car, then just take a look at Manila's traffic and hey you. I live in the US but I was originally from Costa Rica. I can't speak for other small countries but in my opinion Costa Rica might be the most peaceful little country in the world. Only 4.8 million people, no military, breathtaking nature. Theft is kind of a problem here but mainly in San Jose, the capital of Costa Rica, but other than that it's fairly tame. The locals are friendly and majority of them would give you the shirt off their backs if you really needed it. Most places you can leave the doors unlocked as you sleep because it's so chill there, and it's so easy to get laid if you're American. A lot of Costa Ricans seem to have a fetish for Americans. Don't know why. I live in Liechtenstein and it's a lovely place to live. You can easily stay in contact with pretty much everyone you've met growing up. You always run into someone you know. Everywhere you go and people will greet you on the street. It's a quiet and peaceful place and we enjoy a very high standard of living and crime rates as well as unemployment are very low. The problem is that there's really not much to do around here, especially if you're young. There's no club scene. We only have 2 movie theaters in the whole country, no shopping malls etc. And surprisingly, pretty much everyone that gets the chance to go to university, which is only a small amount due to our very strict school system, leaves for another country as soon as possible. I don't feel like we're very progressive socially and we're only very slowly changing since a majority of young people who could fuel the change for future generations would rather move to another country altogether. Fortunately, Austria and Switzerland are each only a 10-30 minute car ride away. I rarely ever go out in Liechtenstein because there's no real clubs and it's really expensive. Take a 20-minute bus ride to Austria and you've got decent opportunities to party and you pay only half as much for drinks. I love it here but there's a reason pretty much all of my friends are traveling the world whenever they can and I myself am leaving for Asia next week. Mauritius. Population a bit over 1M. Everybody speaks 3+ languages. You can drive across the island in 1.5 hours. Cars are horribly expensive due to taxes. Like crappy Fords are 2x pricier. The relative obscurity of the country means that the people are pretty insulated from world affairs. Nobody cares too much. When I was a child, my teacher didn't know about the Iron Curtain. Rising ocean's gonna frick our crap up real soon though. Monaco resident here. Monaco isn't exactly sovereign as you'd understand it, so it's really much like living in France, except we pay less tax. Singapore. Advantages. Most parts of the country accessible to you. Mobile reception everywhere. Disadvantages. No way to take a decent vacation unless you leave the country. Everything's imported. Every single thing. Living in American Samoa. The advantages are that it is quiet and relatively safe to live. No property taxes. Food is plentiful, both grown and imported. Amazon does ship here, but not always. Bilingual speaking English and Samoan, US territory so access to funds. Thank you American taxpayers. The disadvantages are limited job prospects, healthcare, shortage of doctors, funding and subject to corruption. High cost of import goods and its remoteness makes travel quite expensive to the US. Education needs help. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.